Welcome to People Tech, the podcast of WorkforceAI.news. Today, my guest is Dr. Autumn Krauss. She is the chief scientist at the Future of Work Research Lab at SAP. Autumn, thanks very much for being here. It's great to talk with you, as always.
Thanks, Mark, for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to it.
So this is kind of a continuation of a conversation you and I started at HR Tech a month ago or so. And we're going to talk about AI and AI's use, but also sort of get under the hood of some of the things that are going on. So one of the things that you said to me in Las Vegas was that AI has now reached a critical mass of interest and energy for both employees and HR. And I'm wondering, where did that interest come from, and here's what's behind it.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the question. I think there's multiple motives happening here, and I'll just be honest and I'll disclaim that I'm an organizational psychologist by discipline. I lead a team of organizational psychologists of various specialties, and so we're always thinking about motives and the why behind decisions and priorities, both for organizations and employees. And so in this instance, it might be easy for someone like in the media or more of like a pundit approach to say, oh, this is all about intrinsic motivation. Everyone's just looking forward to the better world we'll all live in as a result of AI. Or alternatively, this is, all about the stick, if you will, and organizations are mandating it. You read the news even today as we're filming this, and there was commentary along the lines of, use AI or leave coming from executives, right? So I get both approaches. I think it would be naive to say that it's one or the other. I think you have a group of employees who really are seeing the value, who have, let's call them the early adopters, but maybe in their personal life or through their own natural inclination to experiment, try out new tools, they're seeing value there. There is a critical mass, I think, of energy and curiosity about AI and seeing the potential good that it could offer in your employee experience. So I don't want to discount that. I think there is a segment of that workforce. I think there's also another segment of the workforce, as we've seen with our own research, who are just aware that the nature of their jobs are going to shift, and they feel that they need to be learning AI skills more in the context of, let's say, self-preservation and being able to still be relevant and have opportunity to attract jobs and employers in the future. And so that might be a little bit more of, a desire to maintain employment and have opportunity in the future that's driving those decisions versus just innate curiosity. Even from our global sample, as an example, we found that 42% of jobs, as employees estimated, the portion of their job that could be automated by AI. So if you are sitting in a situation and you're at that average, you kind of need to be asleep to not realize that it would be important for you to start learning and understanding AI in your jobs for the future. And so that might be another rationale that I would point out. So we have like motives of just the intrinsically interested, leaning into it because they see personal benefit. And then we have the others who are doing so maybe out of concern, job security, and recognizing that they have to more than they necessarily want to. And the last thing I would say on this one, Mark, is that you also raised the question, like, where's the critical mass of energy coming from HR? And I would say that it mirrors that workforce dichotomy I just referenced. So the idea that there would be some HR teams who are really led by perhaps more progressive CHROs who are recognizing the potential value, the uplift here when we think about not just efficiency, but effectiveness of the HR function. And so that's the rationale for the why leaning into AI. And then there's also plenty of CHROs that I've spoken with and that you read about as well, who are just feeling a lot of pressure from their boards. So, like, just knowing that they have to do something and they need to do it, but really perhaps a little bit at a loss to where to start and how to get going. But so again, external pressure within the organization for the HR function, as well as some recognizing the potential value it could deliver to them. And so doing it on their own behalf. I'm gonna play the card of it's a little bit of both. Intrinsic and extrinsic motivation happening here. Psych 101.
Okay, so what's that doing to their attitude? I mean, we keep hearing that employers like AI, it's giving employees more time to to do other things and what have you. I'll come back to that one, but you mentioned when we talked about a lot of employees, I think it was 63%, say they spend more time learning how to use AI than they actually save in time. So what's that tell you?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. This is something that we really want to, again, like it, spirit of the team of running a science team and a research team, really need to unpick some of these things. There's so much nuance and complexity happening here. And if you are reading anything or listening to anyone who's painting in broad strokes, all of a sudden everyone's gotten all this time back and it's creating all this space for them to have more meaning and purpose at work. And it's just kind of happening miraculously. I would give caution to that. And on the other side, same thing. Like you have a different story forming where people are getting some time back, but they're all that's requiring of them is congratulations, you've won more work to do. All that work you couldn't get to, go get that done now. Produce more widgets, if you will. So also just a quite dark story and about the potential consequences to employee experience as they do earn any time back. So what does our research suggest here? I'm going to come back to your point about it taking more effort to learn AI than save. We'll address that. But if we just level set here, that the latest research that we've done shows that employees on average, again, I keep saying on average really empathically because it's so important to emphasize here. There's so much variability in these data, but on average, 75 minutes a day are being saved by employees as a result of AI. And that was up quite significantly, 23 minutes more than what we saw in January of this year. So that starts to feel meaningful, again, on average. And at the same time, almost like a paradox, you have in the same sample, employees saying that they're taking more time to learn how to use the tools than they're saving. And so you mentioned the 63% number. That is correct from our research. And I'll just split that even finer. So 29% said that they were actually spending much more time learning AI tools than what they were saving. And 34% said somewhat more time. So still, there's time that's being put into the system to learn AI, arguably more than they're getting back in many instances. And I just view this, I do not view this as a story of this is what you and I would be talking about if we were doing this podcast in a year. I do think it is reflective of a moment in time and a moment in time where we're just seeing a lot of friction and challenge with the AI implementation, the rollouts, and the adoption inside organizations. And I would argue that, if I put my organizational change hat on for a moment, that we've struggled as companies to figure out how to move from that experimentation, give it a go, see what you figure out for yourself. It'd be great if you, used it and learned how to and got benefits and tell me what you learned. And kind of that energy was where we were arguably over a year and a half ago to now these like expectations of widespread usage and uplift that really haven't manifested. And why? Well, we haven't really given that foundational, I'm going to call it learning and development, but I wouldn't get too attached. Like, I'm not asking you to go teach every employee, how to prompt engineer for a specific AI tool. What I am suggesting is that we've missed a trick in building foundational, what we would call AI literacy, that would allow employees to just understand enough to reap some benefits, to see the efficiency gains. And so I view this statistic as an important one, I'll be honest. This idea that 63% of people are saying, well, you know what? I'm burning cycles figuring out how to use these tools that now I've been told I need to and not getting as much benefit out of it as my company thinks I'm going to. And that really speaks to the fact that we've kind of put the cart before the horse. We gave everyone the tools, but we really didn't give everyone the training and the underlying understanding to make them effective with their tool use. So there's work to be done there, I would say.
Do you see that changing? I mean, the conversations that you folks have in SAP and Success Factors, as a vendor, is this the kind of thing you're trying to address? So people will spend basically, less time training and more time applying it.
Yeah, I do think we have a role to play here as SAP success factors for sure. I think we have an opportunity to one, make our tools more intuitive to use, create a situation with our AI capabilities that make them easier for employees and leaders. And HR for that matter, to understand how to use them, to be able to deploy them easily, to get that uplift on efficiency that everyone's striving for. So that's a role for us as we design and implement our tools. We also have an opportunity, I think, to embed easy ways to help employees use them. So if we think about our AI use cases, are we able to also embed some of those micro guidance, micro instruction right inside the tool at time of use, so that employees can just quickly build some of that literacy, at least to be able to get the immediate thing done they're trying to with the capabilities we offer. So I think like in our swim lane as tech provider, we have a great opportunity to really take that into consideration as we're trying to get employees, managers, HR to leverage our AI capabilities. And then beyond that, though, I also think as a research team, as a future work research lab, we continue to study AI literacy and put forward and promote this, endorse it as a capability that customers and companies should be considering. That's arguably outside our sphere of control to build AI literacy generally inside our customers' organizations. But it's certainly in our sphere of influence, I would argue, that we can educate them on what AI literacy is and help them figure out how to bring that in as a foundational capability to their company. So I think it will change. I think that there is enough, again, I'll use the word friction, not so much at like a UX level, but more as an organizational adoption level, where companies are just not fully where they want to be or thought they would be in AI benefits. And so they're trying to figure out what do they need to do, how do they need to pivot, and building that basic capability, maybe hit and pause on all of the tool use, and just building some of that foundational AI literacy might allow them to like accelerate rather than continuing to try and like throw more tools at their workforce.
So, while employees are sort of navigating this,
Mhm.
one of the things that you hear a lot from everybody, especially vendors, but employers too, is AI is going to save their employees a lot of time.
Mhm.
So, what are the employees doing with that time? I mean, it's not like they're suddenly getting hours sliced off their job.
Mhm.
So, what happens with that?
With the time back, yeah, that's a good question. So let's assume we'll go back to kind of the scenario you and I were just playing out. Let's just assume that we do have employees who are reaping some benefit, getting some of that time back. Let's that average of 75 minutes a day. And then you say, well, what do you do with the time? And we studied this quite extensively. We started last year because we were really seeing some misunderstanding, I'd say misalignment, if you will, between the workers and the organizations. They both seemed like they were saying the same things, but we kind of felt that actually they meant different things. So you would have employees speaking, at least through our research and also the secondary research we read, saying, we're really looking forward to that time savings, that time savings. And then you'd have organizations who were really touting the productivity uplift that they expected. And productivity only comes from time savings if you're putting that time back into the system to generate more output. That isn't a guarantee. And so we actually, because of our hypothesis and hunch that this didn't seem as aligned as we might anticipate, we asked employees, like who owns the time? And this was something we studied last year. We studied again this year, so I can kind of give a bit of an update. So last year we found that on average, 54% of employees said that the organization owns the time back. But then, of course, that means the rest of them. So your 46% said that they own that time. And then this year we see the needles only move slightly. So now we have, and probably within standard of error, if you really want to be a nerdy like quant person for a minute. And the idea is that the company owns the time at 57%. So this year was 57% in a separate sample. This last year was 54. Hasn't moved very much. So what does that really mean? Like in simple terms, you've got a little less than half of employees saying, well, that time's mine. I used novel tools and was smart with my efficiency gains at work, and I'm going to keep that time for various reasons. We can dig into why if you're interested. We've run a little bit of who those people are and who wants to keep the time back. And then you have a separate group that says, no, it belongs to my company. Now, to your question, Mark, around what do you do with the time? We've also studied that as well, because we also know, okay, well, how much, if for those people who are giving it back to the company, what are they doing with it? And predominantly, we found that most of them were saying that they were using it just to improve, and I don't want to say just to, because it doesn't matter, it does, but do more or better of their core work tasks. That was the bulk of them. So it does really validate that idea. Well, I've got a ton of work to do, so I'll put that time back to getting the rest of my work done. But then you did find some folks that were saying that they were using it to improve their knowledge and skills. We really endorse this approach, like the idea to actually make reskilling and upskilling happen at a time when we've struggled to do this systemically inside organizations. And so redeploying the time in that manner, also helping other colleagues, spending more time with customers. There's other good reasons to use the time. But I think an interesting one here is that there still lives, from the research we've done, there still lives a situation where employees are unsure what they're supposed to be doing with that time. And so, if we have any of the business leaders, decision makers on listening to us today, I would just say that this is again seems to be a gap and missed opportunity. That let's be explicit. Let's provide guidance to our employees about what you're hoping for as they get that time back and what they should be doing with it, and arguably think more strategically than just the more widgets situation. There's ways that I think we can redeploy the time for mutual benefit of employees and the organization. So that would just be like one thing I would suggest. And if you can humor me for one more data point, just stick with me, Mark. I promise it'll be worth it. Um,
Okay.
we asked employees if you were allowed to keep the time and use it any way you want it. Now, that could still be for work purposes, but if you were allowed to use the time back any way you wanted, we found a significant improvement. People said, you know what, if I could use the time any way I wanted, it could reduce my stress and my burnout. I could spend more time improving my skills, etc. And so when I say employers should provide guidance on how the time should be used, one answer could be that you give employees discretion of how to use that time. Just be explicit about it. Because I think there could be real advantage there for employees to have a little bit more autonomy and empowerment about how they use that time.
There could also be a conflict coming, couldn't there? I mean, if you have a significant portion of employees who think this saved time is theirs and the employer thinks differently, that's got to get worked out somehow.
100%, yes. But last year, when we first kind of discovered this and observed it, I suppose would be the point, and then went and tested with some data, was our assumption? The term we were most often using was slow moving car crash, because it just kind of felt like it was slow moving, and that like the time back really wasn't the numbers that people would have wanted or expected. But we just could see this turning into an impasse. And you have to assume, if you don't have an organization with high trust, high transparency, high psychological safety, all those good things, if you aren't sitting in an organization that has that and you are reaping time back, you're not going to disclose it, for fear that there'll be some type of mandate for how you're meant to use it that won't feel beneficial to you. And so again, I go back to this idea of building foundational openness and transparency about the expectation of how that time should be used, and thinking strategically, not just in the lane of more productivity, but other potential outcomes that could be beneficial to employees as well. I think there's just a real chance here to be more strategic. And if you don't do that, you're absolutely correct. We do see the conflict brewing.
I've got to imagine that to employees, we talk a lot about AI, but I always have the impression that employees really don't care. I mean, employees just want the tool and they want to know how to use it and they want it to work, whether it's AI or something else, doesn't matter. So, does all of our talk about AI kind of sort of diffuse our focus, as it were, from where it should be?
I I could see that, and I can actually give you a little bit of a data story about how we saw that. This was research that we did last year, and I purposely say we did it last year because this is a moving target. As AI would become more ubiquitous, widespread, everyone's talking about it, using it. I would imagine these data results would move, but I do think there's still something to anchor to, and they provide a validation for what you're suggesting here, Mark. So what we studied was we actually were looking more at employee experience. We were trying to figure out what are the key factors that actually really matter to an employee's experience at work. And so we surveyed about 2,000 people globally, employees of various roles, and we asked them really across 28 factors. So think about all your classic ones that might be part of your employee experience, like psychological well-being, physical safety, tools and technology, all the things that you might fair pay, that would be part of an employee experience package, if you will, within an organization. And when we ask them to rank and rate, the top 28 factors. So here's 28 things that we think matter to employee experience. Tell us how important they are to you. And then we clearly got back a list ranked across that population. And number 28 was AI. And I always laugh because if you look at the scatter plot, you'll see variation in the ratings of importance, also the level of agreement amongst employees. And then there's just this one outlier, just like imagine in your mind's eye, this scatter plot of all these factors and how important they are to employee experience. And then this one little outlier, and always a good student in presentations raises their hand and says, what's that outlier down there at the bottom that nobody cares about and most people don't agree on? And it's AI. And always you get kind of a bit of a laugh and a snicker, especially working for SAP SuccessFactors as a technology vendor, a little bit of like a concerned look like, oh no. And I think my point here more is I'm going to come full circle to your question, how much does it matter? In it of itself, giving employees AI and then assuming they all of a sudden will have a better employee experience, we're missing the plot. Like the plot of the story is that we use AI to enable the factors of employee experience that actually matter to our workforce. So when we look at something like the chart that we looked at, and this would be different for all of our listeners, in your organization, what are the factors of employee experience that matter most to your workforce? And then how can you use AI to enable those factors, to make those things better that innately are the things that our employees care about most? So for an easy example might be like growth and development. Like for some segment of our workforce, that really matters. They want to know how they can develop, how they can move into new roles, what learning and development opportunities they have. That is an innate factor that they care about. Okay, cool. Well, we can deploy AI even within SAP SuccessFactors to help enable that, to mobilize that, to make that come to life for employees. And so that is the story that we tell and counsel our HR leaders when I spend time with them and my team does. That this whole idea of like, we give you AI, you should be so happy and more productive and engaged. It's not how it works, right? It's an indirect effect. We give you AI to enable the things that you care about to make your work experience better.
Let me ask you just one more question. And this can be related to what we've just been talking about, or can be about something else. What is the question I should have asked you today that I didn't?
Do you do that to everyone, or is this just a
No,
special?
you're the first one, but it occurs to me
Like,
it's fun.
I really was hoping that we would get in more to work redesign because I know that this was of interest to you the last time we chatted. And the reason I bring that up is because our conversation so far today really was focused more on current tasks and current experience and what are employees experiencing when they're trying to use AI within their current jobs. And when we study the future of work and most recently released our predictions report at Success Connect, actually we're really trying to put forward this idea that organizations in their short-term thinking are very much focused on trying to get more output and throughput out of their current workflows, current jobs and tasks as they've been designed. And we just don't think that this is the strategy that's going to get any of those transformational outcomes that frankly both employees and organizations are looking for. Like, how can we make work actually better? And so that would be a conversation I would love to have at some point, because I do think that there's a different future. There's an alternative future where we're just not trying to get more juice out of the squeeze of our current jobs. And instead, we're actually redesigning work from the ground up, trying to figure out what the tasks should be that we should be doing as humans as well as AI. And there's a chance for some real, like, I'm going to use the word synergy. Probably everyone's groaning, but I'm going there, synergistic impact and benefit if we just can really crack this nut, trying to figure out how work could evolve so that both employees and AI can reach their potential. I think it's a thing. It should be a thing. And I caution organizations who are so focused on like the efficiency, productivity gains currently that they're waiting for something to like later deal with work redesign and the transformational stuff. We're just never going to get there. So that would be what I hoped we could talk. Which I
Well, except for
so I kind of did. So I kind of did it.
you did, and actually, the double-edged sword is now I'm going to ask you to come back again. But let me ask you one question related to that. Is what you're describing should happen? Is it really possible, like in this business environment, that it can happen?
Yeah, this is something that I do think I'm going to be an optimist here and I'm going to say yes, in part because we are in the depths of like studying this right now and trying to figure out how to make it happen. Because I do
Mhm.
what I don't want to leave you with or our listeners with is this idea that it's an if. Like, well, if we did that. I don't think it's an if. I think it's a how. I think the real value here for organizations, the unlock of what AI can do is not by just currently automating everything we have in place, but actually doing the movement towards new work models and new nature of jobs. And I do think that this is possible. Now, one of the ways I've heard a smart person say, I won't take credit for it, but when I've had this conversation with a smart colleague, they've really said, well, we should look to AI native companies and how they're setting up and what their jobs look like. Because realistically, you'd argue if you were fresh, that you'd set up in a new model with new types of work and tasks and how humans are working alongside AI versus
Mhm.
large organizations that are just going to struggle to move, bureaucracy and process that's been well embedded and culture for that matter that's been well embedded. So our team is doing both. We're trying to figure out how to help organizations move and change and do this transformation. We think that there's a technology opportunity here, of course, to scale this well. But at the same time, we look to, the startup friends that we have and how they're designing work for inspiration. Because if you had a fresh piece of paper, you'd probably design work pretty differently today.
Mm, it's true. Autumn, thank you so much. It was great talking to you. It's always fun to talk with you. I will ask you back so we can get more into this. And thank you again.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Mark. It was a good time. I'm happy to do part two when we have more data to offer.
Okay, great.